Welcome to Blue Talks.
Hello, everybody. It is so wonderful to be here at Northwestern University. Thank you for having me. And what we're going to be talking about today is the single biggest issue within companies. Now, if you think about the single biggest issue, you might imagine it's something like strategy or talent or acquisition or processes. But really, the single biggest issue with companies is communication. And I want to share a quote with you from university professor and former Whirlpool exec, Professor Robert Fry. And he said exactly that. He said the single biggest issue with companies is communication. And so throughout my career, I kept seeing this come up over and over again in different organizations that I would be a part of when I was working with leadership teams. And so myself and my business partner, we started looking into this and we said, all right, if we know that this is the single biggest issue, then how do we solve it? How do we move forward and help people master this big issue of communication to move forward and be more effective? Because can you imagine what we could do if we solved that big issue? And so we started looking into it. And what we found is that there's a very clear lack of honesty in the workplace. And I think we've all felt that, whether it was somebody skirting the truth. Maybe we didn't tell fully what was going on with the project. Sometimes people straight up lie to us, but it was very clear we had an issue of honesty when we were looking at what was going on with communication within the workplace. But then going a little bit deeper, the question then became, well, why? Why are we having such an issue being honest with the people that we work with every single day? What was going on there? And so as we dug deeper, what we found is that lack of honesty was really driven by a lack of openness. So that's what I want to share with you today and what we mean by those two words. Because we're going to think about it a little bit differently today than maybe how we think about it mainstream culture these days. And what's really important here is that when we started looking at this lack of openness, I for myself had to look at it and say, oh man, I struggle with this. And so as I'm sharing this here today, I want you to know that you're not alone if you're looking at that and saying, maybe I'm not as good at that as I thought I was. Maybe I've got a little bit more work to do. I'm right there with you. And that's why I do what I do every single day, helping people become masterful communicators. And so I want to be really clear, like I said, on what I mean by honesty and what I mean by openness. So we'll start with the honesty side of things. And so honesty, as we define it, is being truly and freely yourself, speaking into what you want and how you feel. I want you to think for just a moment, how often are you doing that today? I mean, really, if we don't have the real you present in the room, at the table, in the conversation with your team, what do we have? What are we working with? Some type of facade, some fakeness? We're certainly not going to get to the root of an issue. And so this is a big piece and a big skill that we need to work on. Now, honesty is one half of what we need more of. Again, remember, what drives the lack of honesty is a lack of openness. And here's where I want you to think about it a little bit differently today. Because before, maybe you've heard about openness and you've thought about it as being an open book or being transparent. But if we look at the definition of honesty, to me, that's really wrapped up in there. And so openness, as we define it, is this. It is listening without reservation, putting your needs and wants on pause for someone else. I'll say that one more time to help it sink in. Openness is listening without reservation, putting your needs and wants on pause for someone else. And I want you to pause for just a moment and consider, how well are you doing this today? How well do you think your team is doing this today? And then lastly, how well do you think your organization as a whole is doing that today? This is a big gap right now in our ability to communicate that is getting in the way, is blocking people from being honest with us. And we share this world with 8+ billion people. And so we got to bring some more openness into the conversation, because it can't just be about us all the time. That doesn't work out so well. So now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, great. This is great, Grace. We've got these two big definitions, but what does that really mean? What does that actually look like? How do I identify this out in the world? And so to answer that question that you might be wrestling with right now, we created what we call the open and honest model. It's a 2x2 model where we're really just looking at the different behaviors that show up when it comes to our ability to be honest and our ability to be open, especially when it comes to a workplace in a team setting. So I want to take you through each of the quadrants within the model so we see what behaviors we typically experience out of individuals within each quadrant. So the first one that I want to start with is the one on the bottom, and that is low honesty and low openness. This means the individual does not have a great ability to be truly and freely themselves. They also do not have a great ability to listen without reservation. They are struggling to communicate on a regular basis. And how we experience this individual typically is this. We experience them as being oblivious, disengaged, untrustworthy, and unreliable. And you might be looking at that and thinking, wow, that's tough, Grace. And I would say, yes, absolutely. It's tough to be that individual. It's also tough to have that individual in your organization. You never know where they're at, where they're coming from. You're not hearing a lot from them. But I'm willing to bet there are probably some people exhibiting those behaviors in your organization right now. And so the question becomes, how do we help them navigate that? Okay? So watch out for that. Now I'm going to take us up on the model, and I want us to think about an individual who has an ability to have a high level of honesty. So they're really great at speaking into what they want and how they feel. It's great. But on the opposite side of that, they're not so great at putting their needs and wants on pause for someone else. And how we experience that individual is like this: aggressive, defensive, arrogant, and disregards others. Now, I'm willing to bet there's probably a face that's popping up in your brain right now when I say those things. And that's okay. But what's not okay is that we leave that individual there. And so I encourage you to take this tool back to them and say, hey, I learned this thing from Grace at Northwestern. This is where I'm experiencing you right now. I don't know what's going on, what's happening, but I know it's not great for our team. And can you imagine if you ask them, where are you experiencing me on this model? And the kind of conversation you can have when you build up that skill and ability to be open and honest with each other. Man, light bulbs are going to go off for each other. That's the magic of what we're talking about. All right. Now we're going to go kitty corner on the model. And we're going to think about somebody who has now a high ability to be open. They're really great at listening without reservation, but they are not so great at being truly and freely themselves. And how we experience, or the behaviors that we see from that individual, are this. We experience them as being passive, stagnant, indecisive, and insecure. That's a really tough spot to be. And I want you to just consider for a moment that the last two quadrants that I just shared with you are aggressive, defensive, arrogant, disregards others individuals. We're very clear on how those people are, right? Their face popped up in your brain. And we know why they're damaging to our teams. They're the people who take up all the air in the room. Nobody can say anything outside of what they have to say. And man, don't disagree with them either. But what I would pose to you is that the individual's kitty corner, those that are experienced as passive, stagnant, indecisive, and insecure, they are equally as damaging to your teams. And the reason I say that is because you have hired them for their specific expertise. They're in a position within your organization, but you're not getting a lot from them. You don't know where they stand. You don't know what direction they want to take. And that's a really difficult place to be as well. So we got to watch out for those two dynamics in our organizations, because they very often play off of each other as well. All right. And the last quadrant I want to leave you with is this. Somebody who's got an ability to have a high level of openness and a high level of honesty. This is a masterful communicator. This is what we're after within our teams. And how we experience that individual and the behaviors that we see is that they are engaging, they are a high trust individual, they are clear and actionable, and there's an ease of communication. Man, isn't that where we all want to be? Isn't that the team members that you want to have around you? That's what we're after. That is what I help my clients work through and work towards every single day. Because it's not just about remaining in one of these quadrants. We'll shift throughout all of them. For some people, it's within a year. For some people, within a month. Let's be honest, for some of us, it's within a day. We're shifting throughout these behaviors. So the important part here to recognize is when you get stuck in one of these quadrants and what skill you need to bring in and what you need to build to get out of that, to get back to being an engaging, high trust, clear and actionable, with an ease of communication individual. Because that's when we're thriving and that's when our organizations can really move forward. And I fully believe that when we as individuals, when we as teams, and when our organizations increase our ability to be open and to be honest, that is when we will change how the world communicates. Thank you so much for being here with me today.